Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to quickly go through the kickoff for the 2023 SPARK campaign. If you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you've been here before, welcome back. If you stayed with me through the past year, then you will recall in 2022, we did an annual campaign fundraiser for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. I'm happy to say with the help of this fantastic doll community, we were able to raise almost $2,000. To carry on the tradition of the SPARK campaign into 2023, we're highlighting the North Carolina Museum of Dolls, Toys, and Miniatures. This year's pattern incentive is called the Holiday Spark, and it's made for the Made to Move Barbie. This sewing tutorial will walk you through the construction steps of that multi-layer organza dress. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll be using a green satin as well as a poly liner, and I've also purchased some 1.5-inch organza ribbon to match the dress. The Holiday Spark pattern includes 5 pieces. You're going to tape together piece A and B of the skirt pattern, then you have the bodice pattern, the collar pattern, and the collar band pattern. Before laying out the pattern, make sure to iron your fabric well to make sure that you don't have any ripples. With our fabric ironed, we're going to go ahead and lay our pattern pieces out with the grain line matching the selvage edge of the fabric. It's a cut one for the skirt as well as for the bodice. There's 2 for the actual collar ruffle, and then there's 1 on the bias for the collar band. With our pattern pieces cut out, the first step in the construction is to sew the darts in the bodice as well as the bodice lining. You want to make sure you leave the strings long enough that you can tie the darts off. We'll tie the darts off, take both pieces over to the ironing board, trim the seam allowance, and press the darts. With the darts pressed in the bodice sections, the next thing we're going to do is turn up the lining edge at the waist 1/4 inch and give it a press. Next, we'll take the lining of the bodice and place it right sides together to the actual bodice with the lining side up. We'll pin those 2 pieces together and we'll sew across the top edge and down the left back opening. We're going to trim into that seam allowance, turn it right side out, and give it a press. When you're pressing the edge of the bodice lining, you do want to take special care to make sure that the lining isn't going to be showing at the front of your garment. So you just want to double check that as you're giving it a good press. With the bodice constructed, we'll turn our attention to the skirt. We're going to place the skirt lining to the skirt right sides together and sew along the hem edge. With the hem sewn, we're going to trim in towards that seam allowance and press the hem. Just like the lining on the bodice, you want to make sure that the lining isn't showing at the front of the skirt once you have it pressed. With the hem of the skirt pressed, we're going to pin the lining to the skirt and we're going to zigzag the raw edges of the right and left back opening. With the raw edges of the skirt and the lining sewn together, we're going to refer back to our patterned skirt piece to mark the placement for our ruffles. The first layer of ruffles actually goes right here at the waist edge, which we're going to be putting on with a gathering stitch. Then we're going to mark placement 1¼ inch down from the waist edge to add the additional rows for the ruffles until we have 5 additional rows. With our marks in place on our skirt for where we're going to place those ruffles, it's time to get that ribbon ruffled. To create the look that I have for the actual pattern for the holiday spark, I used 6. So if you want to emulate the exact design, then I would go ahead and recommend using that on your ruffler as well. With our ribbon ruffled, our first step is going to be to place the first row to the waist edge. You do want to place a little bit of extra ribbon past the finished edge of the skirt. The first row is actually set using a gathering stitch because we will be pulling that to fit the waist edge of the bodice. We'll set the next 5 rows in a similar way, but instead of using a gathering stitch, we'll use a regular stitch. With the addition of those ruffle layers, you can really start to see how the holiday spark gown is coming together. So at this stage, you're going to grab your iron and just do a light steam right at the seam where you place the ruffles so that you can remove any evidence of the heat erasable marker. The next step is going to be to baste the ruffles to the edge. You want to make sure that you sort of pull the ruffle in towards the actual skirt so that you have a nice curved edge to the ruffle and you're not flattening it down at the back. Once you have the ruffles basted, you can trim off the excess ruffle at each row. With the ruffles basted to the skirt, you will recall that that first stitch along the waist edge was a gathering stitch. We're going to pull that stitch gently to match the waist edge of the bodice and pin it right sides together. Let's get that sewn in place. With the bodice sewn to the skirt, you want to check both sides and make sure everything looks good, and then we're going to press that seam allowance up. The next step in construction is to sew the raw edges of the bodice and the lining together at the back right opening. I'm going to do that with a zigzag stitch over at the sewing machine. I'm going to grab my needle and thread and hand finish the folded edge of the lining to the waist seam. We have a few additional steps and our dress will be complete. We're going to place the dress right sides together, carefully tucking the rows of layers in at the back edge, and we're going to sew from the hem edge to the dot as indicated on the pattern. After we get our gown turned right side out, we'll get a quick fit to our doll. I knew when making this dress that this beautiful Christmas green would be a perfect match to this looks Barbie, and she just looks fantastic with that red hair. I like the way everything's fitting through the back, the way the ruffles are matching up on that center back seam, and I'm going to mark the placement for the snaps and get them installed, and we'll move on to construction of the collar. With our dress complete, we're going to go ahead and finish the ensemble by creating the actual ruffled collar. It's just 2 pieces and it's a really easy construction. We're going to place the collar ruffle right sides together and sew around the curved edge. After you check both sides of the ruffle, you're going to trim in towards that seam allowance, turn the ruffle right side out, and give it a press. With the collar piece pressed, you're going to run a gather stitch along the raw edge, and then we're going to pull those gathers to approximately 3.5 inches. You'll take the collar band and fold one of the long edges under 1/4 inch and give it a press. Next, we grab our ruffle piece and we pull the gathers gently to fit the actual collar band with a little bit of extra left over on each side for tucking. Next, we'll sew the collar to the band. With the ruffle sewn to the band, you're going to take that folded edge of the band and you're going to flip it over the seam allowance and hand finish it, and the collar will almost be complete. When finishing the band to the ruffle, you can fold the last bit of the band in and then fold it over, or you can leave it straight and finish it with some fray check, which is what I'm going to do to decrease the bulk that's going under the bodice of the dress. With the collar finished, you have some options on how you can attach it to the dress. Because of the small scale of the actual Barbie, I think the best solution would probably be to add a small Velcro dot to the edge of each section of the collar and then on the inside of the dress. And that way you could use the collar or take it off depending on how you wanted to wear the fashion. With our holiday spark gown complete, I'm going to grab a little bit of satin ribbon to match the dress and a small buckle, finish the look, and get those final photographs. As you can see from the final photographs, our holiday spark pattern turned out fantastic. The North Carolina Museum of Dolls, Toys, and Miniatures is dedicated to the preservation, conservation, study, and appreciation of dolls. Traveling to the museum and meeting Beth Nance, the director, as well as the numerous volunteers that help her there, was really heartwarming and inspiring. By offering a free digital pattern, choosing an organization, and building awareness, I thought we could spread some true positivity and real kindness. I do hope you enjoy the Holiday Spark pattern. I hope you consider a donation to the museum, and I hope to see you at one of their upcoming events.
Cabin